Now that you have the AV cage set to the appropriate size for the projector that you'll be mounting onto your standard 1.5" NPT drop pipe, you'll use the included ball and collar to take 15 degrees of pitch and yaw in any direction. The ball and collar mounts onto the drop pipe first by threading the ball onto the bottom of the drop pipe, threading it on until it is hand tight. And once it is hand tight, you're then going to use the included Allen key and tighten the set screw in the ball until it makes contact with the threads on the drop pipe and actually mars the threads. Optionally, you can back this unit off and you'll see where that is that the threads on the drop pipe have been marred, and you can actually drill a hole directly through the sidewall of your drop pipe, making the set screw in the ball a shear pin rather than simply holding on by the set screw. However, that is an optional stage. To install the ball and collar, the first thing you're going to need to do is take the collar and slide it up the drop pipe while you thread the ball on. You'll tighten the ball until it is hand tight. And once it is hand tight, you're now going to tighten the set screw in till it makes contact with the threads or it engages the hole that you had drilled in the previous installer tip. Once the set screw is in and snug, that ball is now firm on, and you'll drop the collar over top of the ball, and that will prevent access to reach the set screw. The set screws that are in the outside of the collar are strictly there to hold your position for alignment purposes. Now that you have your ball and collar secured to the bottom of your standard 1.5" NPT drop pipe, the next step is to bolt the AV cage onto the bottom of the collar. Now, depending on the width of your configuration, you'll have multiple different positions that you can bolt the AV cage onto the bottom of the collar using the spacing that's available. Now, one of the key features of this is it allows you to do some lens shift correction with the AV cage to try and keep the position of the lens directly beneath the drop pipe. To bolt the AV cage onto the bottom of the collar, you'll need to lift the AV cage into position using the security bolts provided, the oval drive security bolts provided. Thread the first unit through and snug it so that it's relatively close to tight, and that will support the weight. You'll then take the next bolt and put it to align it in the same set of holes, so it's in the same row of holes, and snug that up, and that will make the positioning of the other two very straightforward. Once the oval drive security bolts that connect the AV cage to the ball and collar are tight, you will have 15 degrees of pitch and yaw and 360 degrees of roll in any direction, and it will be completely fluid and unrestricted. The next step will be to set the leveling feet into the foot nuts. You'll want to turn those in no more than 2 or 3 rotations. Once all 4 of the leveling feet assemblies are put together, you'll then put those into the channels in between here and thread them down, and you don't want the bottom of the leveling foot to protrude below the bottom of the support arm underneath it. Because the hole in the foot nut is offset, you'll need to ensure that the center line here, the center line in the foot nut is parallel in the channel that supports it, in the support arm channel. Here's a tight shot of that. Now that you have the 4 leveling feet into the AV cage, the next step is to install the projector into the AV cage. You'll invert the projector and rest it on the leveling feet. If you taped the position of the lens earlier on in the assembly of the AV cage, you'll now know which of the 4 sides of the AV cage should be facing your screen. Now that your projector is in the AV cage, the next thing you'll want to do is roughly set the alignment of the unit. So you can do that by tightening the set screws through the collar so that the set screws in the collar actually make contact with the ball and hold the alignment relatively close to where it is that they will be on the screen. The fine tuning of your adjustment will be done beneath using the leveling feet on the bottom side. Now that your projector is roughly aligned on the screen, the next stage will be to put the wings on. And you'll take the wings and slide them over top. Sometimes the foot nuts, the leveling feet, will actually protrude through, and you need to lift those to slide them in. Just be cautious of that. Now that the wings of the AV cage are roughly in place, you'll need to take your lock bar and put it on over top. Now, the studs in the lock bar are there purely as guides. They may be painted, they may not be painted. They do not ever receive a nut on them. So what you'll do is you'll put those over top, drop them in place. Sometimes you'll need to squeeze the wings to tighten them and make certain that your alignment is good. They are designed to be good and snug. There, and it will snap into place. Once the lock bar and wing assembly is in place, you'll then take the lock and lock the lock in place. Now that the lock bar and wing assembly are securing your projector in the AV cage, the final step is to do the fine tuning on the alignment of the projector center to screen.